All right, I guess we'll go ahead and get started if everybody's ready. Are we ready? I'm Harry Carver. I don't know what the title is. I guess I'm chair of the coordinators. Together Frankfort doesn't have a board of directors. We have a group of coordinators because you can't be one unless you're coordinating something somewhere along the way. So you can't get by without doing anything. Together Frankfort was organized about 7 years ago by a group of folks that were really concerned about the state of our elections. They got together, brought a large community meeting, and established two main goals for the group: to register folks to vote and to provide accurate and timely information to educate voters. Over the past few years, Together Frankfort has organized and hosted a variety of events, designed to meet that end, to engage the citizens of Frankfort, including candidate forums, public discussions on wide-ranging issues. We also work with other organizations. We've helped co-sponsor things like, Earth Day, the Juneteenth celebrations. And above all, we're out there registering voters at events throughout the community all year long. Right, Mary Lynn, who's not here tonight. We also would like to invite you to join us, either financially or by joining. David and Linda over there at the table, so if you want to see them before you leave, we would really appreciate it. Also, you can go online. We have a website where you could join as well. In part of this, achieving our mission of, educating voters and bringing information to citizens in Frankfort and Franklin County, we had a lot of talk about this. How do you do this? How do you get people together? How do we have, frank discussions about important issues? And people really understand things that are going on, how things work in our community. And we realized, if you spend any time, talking to people, you realize a lot of people really don't understand how things work. So we decided that we would do what we're calling Civics 101, the series of forums, for the next year, 10 years. I don't know how long it's going to last. There's probably a lot of topics that we could cover. So last month we, had a great discussion about the plant board and what it means for this community and what privatization would bring. Tonight we're going to talk about our city form of government. It's been kind of confusing for some folks. We've had, 12 city managers in 21 years. So is this form of government really working for us, or are we just not applying it correctly? So hopefully, by the end of this evening, folks will have a better idea of the types of governments or the forms of governments that cities can choose to have in Kentucky, and get a better understanding of what that means and what we're doing here or what we could be doing here. Our folks that are going to be speaking tonight, first is Ron Scott, who was previously the city manager of Danville and is currently a senior advisor for Kentucky to the International City and County Management Association. He also retired after many years at the Kentucky League of Cities. Brian Trogett is the mayor of Versailles, and who is the past president of the League of Cities. It's just a little overlap here. And has served as mayor since 2013, previously having served on the council. He also spent 15 years here in Frankfort at the Legislative Research Commission. So I will let Ron start. He's going to talk a little bit about the city manager form of government. Brian, obviously in Versailles, where they have the strong mayor form, is going to talk about that. And then we'll take questions. There are cards on your chairs if you want to write questions down, or we can take questions, if you want to ask them flat out, live and in person, we can do it that way, whatever you're more comfortable with. There's also a handout where Mary Lynn took the time to explain as best anybody could the different forms of government, so that might help you, or you can take it home and remember what you didn't hear. So anyway, we'll start with Ron, if you want to go ahead and get started, and I'll get out of your way here.
Thank you, Harry. It's a pleasure to be here tonight, and I'm honored to talk about the form of government, the so-called city manager form of government. And I've had some experience with that, as was mentioned. But as Harry mentioned, I would first just suggest that one of the watershed moments in this country in terms of public administration was not in this century, but in the 19th century. And that is, when our country was formed as a nation, we have the three levels of government: federal, state, and local government. And the early part of our history was that the federal government was trying to figure out, could it stay together, and, would the colonists, the various colonists stay together, or could they leave? And there were a lot of constitutional issues involved. And as we sort of transgress from that moment, you know, and I'm thinking of the period about 1830 or so when we had President Jackson in office, and we transitioned from the Federalist Party to, you know, to a Democrat-Republican Party at that time. It was Democrat as he was elected, but he implemented a series of activities known as the spoil system, where basically to the victor go the spoils. He didn't originate that term, but more so than maybe at the beginning of the country when you had the populist president elected, we had the large change of personnel when one party would be elected versus the outgoing party. So the term was coined by a New York senator, to the victor go the spoils, and that set the stage kind of for state governments to have large transitions in their employees from one governor or one president or one governor to the next. Of course, we had a very upsetting whole century there with the Civil War. Other countries were figuring out how to administer actually services in their country, and we got delayed by the Civil War. And in 1887, Woodrow Wilson, he was a lawyer, but he was a student at the time. He penned the definitive work in public administration called The Study of Administration. And his basic theory, or his basic point, was that administration lies outside the proper sphere of politics. Administrative questions are not political questions. Although politics sets the stage for administration, it should not be suffered to manipulate its offices. So with that sort of beginning, and as I mentioned, Woodrow Wilson went on to become the 28th President of the United States, the whole tone of administration in this country changed at the federal, state, and local levels. And as we progressed in the early part of the 1900s, the concept of the council manager form of government came into being. It was in part driven by the progressive movement, which helped municipalities in terms of cleaning up corruption. They wanted to rid local governments of politics. There were giant cities that had political problems, and so it came about also as a result of the theory that government should be kind of run like a business, a for-profit corporation, that the chief executive should be appointed by a board and be allowed to carry out its operation. Now, you see that form in broad terms here in Frankfort and all places throughout Kentucky in form of local school boards, for example. The school boards elect a superintendent, or they don't elect him, they appoint him, and the superintendent then runs the operations. And you see that in other organizations where it's very common for the appointment of an experienced individual to run the operations. So that form of government, the so-called council manager plan nationally, grew throughout the United States, and it came to be known in Kentucky as the city manager form, which is really kind of a misnomer and does not really do the form service, because the form of government, one of several that cities can adopt, really is a partnership between the elected officials and the city manager. It should, nationally it's called the council manager. Here it's the city manager. Although the commission is distinguished from the council in the strong mayor form, it should be more aptly called a commission manager form, because again, it relates to the form of government where it's different than in the strong mayor form. There are three distinct differences in the form of government. The first feature is the allocation of authority in local government. In the strong mayor, it's allocated in the mayor. In the commission form, or the city manager form, rather, it is allocated to the elected commissioners as a whole, and they share that authority through the appointment of the city manager. They retain significant administrative authority. Here in Kentucky, unlike every other state in the country, they are involved in personnel matters. The city manager does not make ultimate decisions on personnel matters, but rather recommends to the commission hiring and discharge, at least, of employees. They can discipline employees, but there are appeal rights to the elected body. So that's one difference here in Kentucky than nationally. But to early reformers in the United States, that decision to place all of the authority within the elected body rather than to have it within one mayor was intentional. It was based upon English practice, where the real goal was to have an active body make the decisions and not have that within the confines of one individual. Now, you talk about, or it's been a lot talked about, the separation of authority between the city manager and the commission. And it's true that the city manager does have a lot of authority to run operations, but this form of government requires the city manager to interact very closely with the elected commissioners on both policy initiatives as well as operational initiatives. So to be successful, you've got to have a partnership relationship between the elected officials and their appointed administrator. Now again, and our mayor may talk about this more specifically, but in the strong mayor form of government, the mayor has the ability to either withhold or to provide information to commission members. And I would argue that the city commission form, where you have a city manager where the mayor is just one of five, basically, enables all of the elected officials to have a stronger representative relationship with their constituents and achieve those goals in terms of implementing policies on the board. Now, the second important thing to recognize is that the executive responsibilities, again, are assigned in the council manager form or the city manager form here in Kentucky, are primarily the responsibility of the city or county administrator. You can have county managers as well nationally. But again, in Kentucky, in order to implement some of those, the city manager must go to the city commission for approval. The reporting relationship, again, is to the commission as a whole, not to the mayor. So you've got this diffusion of authority among all elected officials. And nationally, it's worked very well. ICMA, the International City and County Management Association, claims that currently in cities with over 2,500 in population, that the council manager form represents 80% of those local governments. And it's a rapidly growing field nationally and internationally as well. Not only in England and Northern Ireland that I visited, but Canada, Mexico, New Zealand. The emphasis really of the International City Management Association is more and more on international development of that form. So, so what is the significance of the form, again, in terms of Kentucky? We have 19 cities in Kentucky that have adopted the form, and they started early. The earliest one, I think, that I was able to document was the city of Newport in 1930. The early form started in about 1911, and it's grown in Kentucky since 1930 to, I think, the last city to adopt it was the city of Franklin in 1994. So these 19 cities in Kentucky are generally the larger cities exclusive of Louisville and Lexington. Although some of the city manager cities go down as small as city of Fulton, for example, with 2,301 person who adopted in 1997. If you consider that Kentucky is now an urban state, over 55% of the population lives within the incorporated areas. If you include Louisville and Lexington, in with city manager cities, you would have 54% of that urban population represented. If you take out the two largest entities of the Louisville-Lexington merged governments, you would have remaining in the urban population of the state about 27%, who are 27% of the urban population that are represented as city manager cities. Now, so, you know, it's a significant form. It's achieved success in most of the large cities of the state, I would say, and maybe it struggles at times, but it has endured since the early part of the 19th century when it was first adopted with the city of Newport through the latest adoption in the mid-90s. So the strength of the city manager form is that, in maybe a more straightforward way, is that you hire an administrator who has skills in the management of the operations of complex cities. Cities are complex and are big businesses these days, and the decisions made by the elected officials who set the direction that the city is going to follow and are implemented by the city manager have major effects upon all the residents, obviously, and upon what the city may do. Cities compete in terms of, bond issuances, for example, and you have to have professional management and the ability to pay, good policies in effect in order to achieve the sale of your bonds to make municipal improvements, among many other things. So the other thing that the form of government brings with a professional city manager is a code of ethics. Now, we have locally, a code of ethics that is mandated by the legislature, and maybe back in earlier than the 80s, maybe that was adopted by the state legislature in the 1980s. Cities did not have that, but even with your municipal code of ethics, that doesn't define all potential conflicts that a city can have or individuals in a city can have. The ICMA Code of Ethics applies to all participating city managers. They can be sanctioned. They can be denied membership, which would have a great effect upon their future earnings capabilities. And so the ICMA Code of Ethics, which has been around since 1927, continues to be involved and evolve and be monitored through a process that results in, I would say, more ethical government, particularly in the larger cities where you have more activities taking place. Now, I don't know. I think my 10 minutes may have elapsed that we were going to talk about initially and then respond. So I guess I will just close with this. I am a advocate for the city manager form of government. I'm an advocate for professional management. The cities that have not adopted the city manager form of government, and about 40 of those or more have adopted city administrators locally through ordinance, and that's permitted to give expertise to the mayor in terms of running the operations. Not all cities have done that, some do, but that basically allows the mayor to have a staff resource that's not necessarily that of the other elected officials. And the mayor can utilize that to his or her benefit and shield information from the commission if he chooses to do so, he or she. So the city manager form of government, as it's called here, really is a more open, representative, and I would say functioning form of government. And if you look at those cities that have implemented it, Bowling Green perhaps in particularly, with over 70,000 population, they adopted it in the mid-60s. And I worked once for the city of Bowling Green. I think they've made great strides in utilizing that form of government in the Bowling Green, Warren County area. So I'll be happy to talk to you in a moment if we have questions, and allow the mayor to also present how well alternate forms of government work here in Kentucky. And we do have both the mayor, strong mayor, the city manager form, the commission form, which we won't really get into tonight, as well as several forms of urban county government that can be established other than the merged government of Louisville, or excuse me, Fayette and Lexington urban county government and the metro government in Louisville and Jefferson County. There's a couple other forms that are also available. So thank you for your attention.
Thank you all so much for having us here tonight. It's good. It's inspiring to see a group turn out to listen to what could be such a boring topic, perhaps, but because not to Ron and I, but I thought it may be to several others. Before I get started, at the risk of definitely not offending anybody by their choice of government, I think Ron and I would agree that no one size fits all with city governments in Kentucky. And I think we need to preserve the ability of cities to select their form of government that best suits them. I do commend Ron's profession. I think is one of the best. I am, in fact, a dues-paying ICMA member, not a full member, of course, because of my position. Great source of research, really great asset, and because of the professionalism of what their members do. I'll run you through a little bit, just since you all don't have the form of government. I'll pretend like you don't know anything about what happens with a strong mayor form of government. Ron talked about several of the things and the differences, the distinctions between the two forms of government. The mayor is, in a mayor-council form of government, really is, the buck stops here, has never been more true than in that position. The mayor has a lot of authority, a lot of responsibility, and I would argue the positive aspect of that is a lot of accountability. There's a transparency in the fact that if something goes wrong in Versailles city government, I'm the face, I'm the name, whether it was my doing or not. Ultimately, the accountability is to me. It is important in a mayor-council form of government, and Ron is correct. The mayor, included in that power, perhaps would be withholding information. That, I'm sure it happens a lot, really, with mayor and council form of government. I think to have an effective city, and I like to think I don't do this, you need to collaborate with the council. They're primarily part-time citizen members who come in and do their best and represent the city very well. They don't have the time nor probably the inclination to get down in the weeds on a lot of the things that I do. But the mayor, one of the roles as chief executive, the mayor is really the personnel director. So nobody gets hired or fired or promoted within the city of Versailles without me signing off on it. And that doesn't mean that I micromanage and that every police officer that gets hired, I'm in the interview room. It means the chief, assistant chief will do the work, bring the paperwork in, say I'm going to hire so-and-so at this salary, and here's what the interview, here's the background, and I can't think of a time I've not signed off on a recommendation. So in that form of government, you still have area experts conducting a lot of the day-to-day activities with, as I would say, an accountable decision maker at the top if something were to go awry. Mayor and mayor-council form of government is required by statute to report to the council on the conditions and the needs of the city, and I just last month presented what we affectionately call a State of the City address, where I'm able to the council and to the citizens and to the press and to the chamber to kind of go over the year past, highlight our successes, highlight where we may have fallen short, and then lay out a vision for the year ahead and keep everybody on task. And that's a strong asset there. The mayor promulgates all the procedures to ensure the orderly functioning of government and the compliance. I would veer off. I would say one of the most important jobs in city government by far is the city clerk with compliance and filing. There's a ton of things that statute, Department of Local Government, and whatnot require cities to file, and clerks do great jobs at the largest cities and the smallest cities of making sure cities stay in line, and that information gets filed. But with executive orders that I may file with the clerk, the council, it's a true separation of powers. The council has the ability, they don't have to confirm anything that I do by executive order, but they have the ability to reactively overturn it or repeal it, if you will. So the council preserves that checks and balances. The mayor in all forms of government presides at council meetings. There's no difference there. I am not a voting member of the council, so the only time I can vote is in the event of a tie. We seldom have ties. Can't vote on ties. The 2 times we've had a tie was a zoning issue, which the mayor is not allowed to vote on because the statute says it's a purely legislative function, so we had to 3-3 it there. And then the appointment of a vacant council member, which also we had a 2-2 vote, and mayor could not break that tie either. So I've not had the pleasure yet to break a tie. I also wanted to ask, who's the jokester who brought the Kentucky Association of Counties pens in here? I almost walked out when I grabbed that pen, but I'll see you outside later, I guess. But the mayor, when we enter into bonds and contracts and agreements with outside entities, council, I'll go to the budget. The budget is the document, of course, that governs the city, sets the priorities, tells us where we're going to spend money, is how you identify your values, obviously. Mayor presents, we're going to start next week in earnest, in fact. I'll call all the department heads together. We'll start with blank sheets of paper. We'll determine what cost of living adjustments, if any, we're going to do, and we'll move forward and we'll go line by line together and get that budget. And then we'll present it to council. I always present it the way the statute is written. To Ron's earlier point about withholding information, the way the statute is written, you don't have to present the budget until the end of May. Has to be adopted by the end of June. That doesn't give a council with no staff a lot of time to do much to that. So credit to that point. But the council gets to vote on the budget, and we collaborate. We have a finance committee. It's just like a normal legislative body. You have committees, and we'll work with them, the city clerk and I primarily. We'll get department heads in, and we'll work through a budget, and we'll present it, and we'll have a big to do like a state of the city and talk about the changes and any big projects, any capital, and the council will vote on it. So that council has the final say over the budget. Mayor does have veto authority in a mayor-council form of government. Council can override. We have a 6-member council. It takes 4 to override. It takes 5 to override, one more than a majority. So I have vetoed one ordinance. I've been mayor for 11 years now. I vetoed one ordinance. It did not get an override vote. So, mayor appoints all non-elected officers. So on the personnel, police chief, fire chief, city clerk, city attorney, public works, the mayor appoints and council has to confirm. They don't have the ability to change they can vote them up or they can vote them down, and then I could come back with somebody else after that. But that's another check and balance. A couple mayor, like in a city manager form, I think the mayor can call special meetings, has the ability, so you don't have to get a group to do it. A few things in Versailles, from my experiences, that I think really where a strong mayor came in handy, the ability to take risks. We've done a lot of things in the past 24 months in Versailles that are going to turn out to be phenomenal additions to the city. We're spending about $4 million on a downtown improvement project, have a pavilion, a stage, the farmers market pavilion, a four-season pavilion, a huge stage, ADA walking trails, highlighting our big spring, which is the head of Glens Creek, which serves some distilleries. So it's the home place of Woodford Reserve's source of water. For instance, we're going to highlight that, highlight some cultural history in the area. We did that when interest rates started going up. And this, I also think a mayor-council form is able to be more nimble. When you have city manager form, the accountability to the commission is governance by committee. And there's the old saying that in all the towns and all the cities, there's no statute celebrating committees, because committees are, by and large, slow-moving creatures. When interest rates started going up, we quickly got with our financial advisor, and we took to the market, got a bond anticipation note for about $9 million at 2.5%. what we're paying on it, which when you think today, it's phenomenal rates. We took that money, we bought an industrial park, we flipped it, profited about $5 million, and this has all happened in the last 24 months. The whole decision to where we're at today. Spent $4 million of those dollars on that pavilion, spent $600,000 on a new maintenance garage. We also bought another adjacent piece of property where we're going to have a standard bred training facility. So we flipped that as well. And we are going to, trying to think, we're going to spend $1 million and some change to update our fire station. We just built a new police station a few years ago. We're going to upgrade our fire station. And in August of 2020, we're going to spend $3 million on parks improvements. County is going to inject $3 million. We're going to inject $3 million. And in August of 2026, we will have zero debt from that. And that is a huge risk and a huge gamble that's going to turn out. I don't think a slow-moving government gets in that quick enough. I don't think a slow-moving government can turn that around. I think the accountability of it gives the council comfort that there is a head to the monster that somebody else can cut off if there's a problem. I'm going to take the blame. I'm going to take the fire for it. So we were able to do that. The notion of taking politics out of government, which does have a great ring to it. I mean, politics in the past few years has taken an ugly turn, obviously. But government, by its very nature, is politics. And there is nothing wrong. Grassroots have driven a lot of good things in this country. And that's politics. That's elected officials like me being intimidated by people. It's being motivated by people and to do good stuff. You know, it's not always bad stuff that comes from politics. The diffusion of authority that Ron mentioned, I think the counter there is a vision is a lot easier to start with two eyes. And then you get buy-in from the council, you get buy-in from the staff, you get buy-in from the community. And a mayor, by virtue of their position, going to have some political instinct. And they're going to have some level of trust with the voters. And I think that comes in handy. I think the staff, like I said, staff maintains an important role in strong mayor form of government. We have department heads just like everybody else, but as I said, the buck stops in my office and in my desk, and they know that, the council knows that, and more importantly, the public knows that. And I think that really is, to me, the selling point for our form of government. And I'm probably at 10 minutes, but I'm looking forward to some easy questions. If you have hard ones, that's...
Thank you all. Ron, are these yours? All right, who wants to start? Who's got the first question? Nobody? Barbara, you want?
The diffusion you mentioned, that can be a problem when I think maybe we have a misunderstanding. We're thinking that our city manager is supposed to be the point person in Frankfort on and dealing with department heads. But from what you're saying, the commission members have more of authority, of responsibility than maybe some of us understood in administering things.
To respond to that, let me try to be clear. In the city manager form of government, it is a partnership with the elected commission, but the commission appoints the manager to run the daily operations. It would be like, to use an analogy, of having Coach Cal have his board of directors give directions to his team players rather than utilizing the skill that Cal brings by contract to achieve the desired results. So there's a few things more demoralizing to a city manager than having elected officials go to department heads and direct operations. The city of Ashland just recently passed an ordinance in 2000, and I think about 15 or 16, that Ashland passed an ordinance to prohibit city employees from trying to interact with elected officials in an inappropriate way. And I'm not sure exactly what that means other than trying to seek favoritism or that type of thing. Again, trying to go through a city manager. Just this past month or two, the city of Ashland enacted an ordinance by a 3-2 vote basically to say that the elected city officials could not direct the operations of or direct city employees to carry out operations. That does not mean that elected officials and city staff cannot talk, but it's a slippery slope, and you do not want elected officials giving directions to city employees on how to conduct business. That's why you have a city manager, you have a team, you have the department heads, and all of that, just as in the strong mayor, the strong mayor form would be the equivalent of city manager in this setting. But if I can expand upon your question just a little bit, the ability of city elected commissioners is to play out about 6 roles, and these roles have been identified throughout the country by a particular consulting firm. And this particular consulting firm was a professor emeritus at the University of Kansas, who also served about 8 years on Lawrence, Kansas, and 2 terms as mayor. They did these studies throughout the country on this basic question of what is the role of the city commissioners. And they found basically that city commissioners elected throughout the country had about 6 roles. They naturally gravitated towards the representative, constituent advocate. When one of the citizens would have a problem, they'd go to their commissioner or the mayor and say, I've got a problem, And so that was one role of connecting the residents with the appropriate city department head to resolve the problem. They have a role of developing strategic planning within the community to determine what is important in the short term and in the long term, and seeing the interconnections of what may be possible in their community. That's kind of a little bit more lofty role. They have a role of trustee steward, looking at the long-term implications of decisions and taking a fiduciary role in the operations of the city government. That's a 3rd role. They have a role as a decision maker, making votes on issues that come before the city council, participating in study sessions, listening to residents, and voting, as a decision maker. They have a role as a community builder, being present and listening to individuals, at community forums such as here tonight, celebrating accomplishments within the community. They're there as a community builder. They can convene important community conversations, in parks, not necessarily in City Hall, in forums such as this or other gathering places. And they participate in events of the city too. So they're a community builder. And they do have an oversight role in conducting the city manager's performance evaluation and in reviewing the audit. Those are, 2 important sort of checks on how the city is doing. Your bond rating is a kind of another 3rd thing when you get ready to issue bonds. But, what was interesting in these studies that this team did throughout the country with hundreds of city officials were that in no city that they found, except for maybe 2, no city really where the city commissioners prioritized their roles as basically oversight of the city manager. That simply was not found in those cities. And in the cases where they did do that to maybe a greater extent, your city manager would typically leave in a couple of years because they were kind of fettered in terms of what they could accomplish. And so, again, and I wish I had a visual for this, but, the roles of those 6 roles that elected officials naturally gravitated toward, they were representative, constituent advocate, they were strategic vision developers, they were trustee stewards of the public trust and property and money, they were decision makers, and they were community builders, and they were oversight. And what they wanted to do, they found what their roles that in all these cities that they wanted to do, they were different than what they at first initially identified. They wanted to pay more attention to developing a strategic vision for the community, to lifting and going forward. They wanted to be a community builder. They wanted to be a trustee steward. and they wanted to be a representative and constituent advocate, solve their problems, decision makers, and sure, provide oversight as appropriate and needed to the city manager forum. And let me say, serving as a city manager as I did for almost 9 years, you know, you have to be responsive to both the community and to the commission, or you are out of there. All employees at city government are at-will employees unless they've got some special protections or procedures, such as maybe the police have. But it ensures responsiveness to all of the elected council or commission members, rather. And for example, you know, the mayor of Versailles was talking about how he started his budget process by talking with the department heads. My first stop was always with the elected commissioners. What is your role? What is your vision of what we need to do? What are your goals to accomplish? You know, and sure, we'd bring the department heads in, but it's driven by a set of 6 people or 5 people rather than, you know, the vision of one person, which may be easier, but may not be where you want to end up after you go through that process. So I'm sorry for the lengthy response, but I want to give it in.
Rich?
Ron, your experience at Danville, if you had a city commissioner or a city councilman that kind of went rogue, if you will, and decided that it was part of their job to go in and try to tell the city manager, you know, do this and don't do that, and I don't like what you're doing here, and I want you to stop doing this. Okay. Did you have some mechanism to protect the city manager from a rogue city commissioner that made the city manager's life miserable?
Well, when it comes to enforcing the city manager plan or the council manager plan of government, the enforcers are the peer city commissioners. They're not really the manager. The manager may attempt to deal in good faith with the commissioner and be respectful. Respect goes 2 ways, and it's required, really, in this form of government. The city manager needs to be receptive to their ideas, but one of the code of ethics of the city manager is to resist intrusion upon the proper responsibilities of administration of the office. So when push comes to shove, ultimately you have to, as city manager, resist intrusion into inappropriate activities of the city commissioner. How you do that is a matter of maybe choice or finesse, but you cannot allow that to continue or you erode the basic structure of the government.
I just have a point of order. Where this is being televised, and I noticed in the last one, it was hard to hear the questions from the audience when you watched it on the tape. So if you all can stand and speak out a little bit, that would be helpful.
Christine?
Sorry. So, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I thought I heard you say that you thought our forum was fairly successful.
Maybe I said something generally along those lines, because I do see that you have the same, City of Frankfort has the same bond rating, for example, as Commonwealth of Kentucky, when you issued bonds for the transit system. And having gone through a number of those bond rating evaluations when we did similar projects for building a new fire station or doing a $26 million water treatment expansion project, we improved our bond rating, but it's based upon a series of questions that the bond underwriters, bond rating agencies provide to you, and those relate to, number one, ability to pay. Do you have the wherewithal to pay back the money you're issuing of the bonds? But it also goes to the professional management of staff, tenure, other related sort of consistency of operations. And I will say it is my personal opinion, and I'm not speaking not just for Frankfort, but my personal opinion is that as the form of government was really structured kind of after or similar to for-profit corporations, where you've got a board and you've got, you know, a person in charge to implement, that your companies, private enterprise, bond rating people, they look for stability in government, policies and procedures that are appropriately laid out and consistent, and the city manager form of government is likely to be a more favored form under those forms of government. Now, I might not be able to document that, but certainly they like consistency, the ability to pay, professional policies, and they don't like rapid turnover of either managers or of elected officials. They like stability.
So then 12 and 21 years, that doesn't seem rapid. That means that it's almost every 2 years, we're losing a city manager.
Well, you may in some years be losing your elected officials. I know maybe in this last round of elections they were the same as before, which is really a testament to the stability of the form of government. If you've got the same ones reelected, nobody's too disgruntled in terms of how things are going, or you probably have change there. But in terms of the professional standards of the city managers itself, that minimum term under the professional code is a 2-year term. The actual tenure, I think, in Kentucky and nationally is longer than that. It's probably 5 or more years now. And you've had examples in Kentucky, like the city of Bowling Green, for example, Charles Coates, who came in there when I left that city and went to the League of Cities, or Kentucky League of Cities. You know, he served almost 30 years.
So they're making it work.
Well, it seems that they have a better longevity of city managers. So, and the city itself seems to be thriving there too. If you've been to Bowling Green lately, growing. Of course, geography and a lot of other features, factor into that.
So who decides the form of government?
Well,
How did you all? Did you say I want to be mayor?
No, I wish I were. I don't have that much power, but I wish I did. Our form of government was chosen 100 years ago, so I don't know. But you can't change it without the voters. So I would never push to change ours in Versailles, and I don't think there would ever be a chance that it would be voted on if done. But ultimately, the voters.
Did we vote on this then? They had this
a long time ago, and I could tell you maybe when that occurred. No, I don't have Frankfurt's, but I would guess it was probably in the early 60s. Probably, that's when.
57.
Okay, could be, yep.
Don?
The first thing I want to say is that the most important thing to make a city run well is good leadership, whatever form you have. And in the case of, looks like in Versailles, we have really good leadership.
We need him to say that louder.
I'm sorry, I don't have a strong voice that carries well. The city manager form has been here since I've been around. I came here a little over 50 years ago. And I think in this small town, the city manager form government got eroded. And the commissioners got in the habit of tinkering around the kind of garbage cans or whatever the current issue was. And then as time went on, as you know, the city manager is in a difficult position. He's got to keep the mayor happy, keep his job. Ideally, we make the policy and the city manager implements it, but that's not, I think that's why we've run off a number of very capable city managers. So, I think in some ways that form was developed because of bad leadership. So a lot goes to electing effective politicians, and we know that doesn't always happen in this country. And so it's a complicated issue. And if you got a good leader, this form may work better. But I think in recent years we have not empowered the city managers to do their job, and they got tired of it and got out again. So I don't think you can fix it with form necessarily. I'm kind of inclined as a citizen to say this system's not working, let's try this different one.
Well, you can do that. There's a petition in the statute. There's a petition process outlined in the statute. If you get 20% of a petitions of the 20% of the last presidential vote and presented in a timely way, you could have that on the ballot and people could vote on it this coming presidential election, for example. But I'll tell you, in most cities that I've had any experience with, well, in Kentucky, I don't know of one city that has changed from a city manager form back to a strong mayor form because of the benefits inherent in the city manager form. It was on the ballot twice in Danville before I served as city manager. Not that I had anything to do with it one way or another, but it failed both times in terms of changing back to a strong mayor form of government. Some people apparently think that's a better form for whatever reason, but the citizens of Danville did not on two separate occasions.
I don't know of any situation where a city manager form was struggling and he turned it around by whatever form they did it.
Well, I do know nationally there have been city manager forms that have changed to strong mayor. St. Petersburg, Florida, for example, comes to mind. That's one that has changed. There have been others that have maintained the city manager form for years quite happily. Charleston, South Carolina, for example, you can go on the web page there, see their city manager, their chief of staff, all their assistant city managers. It's an administrative complex system that they have in these larger cities, and I would say it's fairly infrequent that they change back, and there's got to be some sort of it's a difficult thing to do.
Are there specific rules or something in the statute that provides a code of conduct that drives whether or not what the commission can actually do in regards to the city manager and what the city manager can do with the commission? In other words, are the rules and what should happen if somebody gets out of line? Is there any way to correct that situation, or is it all interpersonal relations?
It's largely interpersonal. There are, and I think the mayor of Versailles talked about some of the statutory requirements on the mayor in the strong mayor form of government, for example. But here are in the city manager plan cities, state law sets forth specific powers and authorities of the Board of Commissioners. They establish by ordinance all appointed offices and the duties and responsibilities of those offices. Those would be the city clerk, city manager, fire chief, whoever it may be, offices. Enact all codes, rules, and regulations for the general public's health, safety, and welfare.
Maybe you're back to that.
Okay, I think it's on. They're required to provide sufficient revenues to operate the city government annually through adoption of an annual budget, and levying all taxes and establishing all fees and charges for city services. Establish compensation by ordinance for all elected and appointed staff, etc. But there's not any real statutory way in which they are required to relate to the city manager. The city manager by statute is required to uphold the city manager form of office in all of his activities, to enforce all state and local laws, to supervise, all the departments, make policy recommendations to the city commission, to appoint temporary employees, to recommend full-time employees or their discharge to the board, etc., and to prepare a budget recommended to the city commission and adopted and administered after adoption. These are outcomes. These are not processes. So there are not codes of conduct necessarily in the statute.
Rich?
Got another follow-up.
Oh, okay.
We've had 12 managers in 21 years. In your opinion, how much time does it take for to hire a city manager, and then how much also time would it be for a city manager to learn the ropes and start actually being effective?
Well, it depends on the hiring side, what the extensive, how far out you reach and so forth, but it can take up to a year. And it can take, even with an experienced manager, it can take months to learn a community's,
If it took 6 months for us So we've had 12 managers in 21 years, 6 months, 12. So we've had, what, 2 years? How many years is that?
A little less than two.
Yeah. But we didn't have anybody. And then we had how much time that went by when, you know, person is not effective because they're essentially learning the people, learning the ropes, learning the city. We bring somebody in from out of town to be our manager. How long does it take to become effective?
Well, statutorily, you're required in city manager form to employ a city manager. It doesn't give you the time frame, but you're required, and your official acts might be compromised if you don't have one within the city.
It's starting to kind of bring to my mind that, we've had some problems here, and we haven't really grown or done too much. And as far as I can tell, I'm not from Frankfort, okay, so I'm a newbie, but it does seem to be a problem.
Rich?
I want to go back to Bill's first question about this code of conduct. And Ron, your response sounded to me like the burden falls to the city manager to resist someone who's not following what should be a code of conduct. And I would think that maybe that is something that Frankfort could do to reinforce with the mayor and city commissioners that thou shalt not do this, thou shalt not do that. You don't have to carve it into stone like, it was handed down to Moses. You maybe burn it into a Louisville Slugger baseball bat and hit people over the head with it once in a while. But you need some sort of code of conduct to keep these elected officials in check from going in and raising havoc improperly with the city manager who's trying to do their job.
My response to that, based upon personal experience and sort of the academic research, is that respect goes a long way towards enabling elected and appointed officials to work together. It's helpful to have a retreat annually or as often as you need to work things out. In Danville, we had a retreat and we adopted a, what was it called? A covenant of respect, I think it was. And it reiterated sort of the roles of the commissioner and the obligations and responsibilities of the city manager. It also tried to incorporate in our procedures a code of civility in our public meetings, because we had a period of time there in the early 11, 12, when I first came in. It was not a very smooth process in terms of public meetings there in Danville. And if I've been given credit for anything in terms of my service there, it was bringing a greater respect in our public meetings and our operations there. But it takes work. You have to understand your role. You have to understand where you want to go. These roles that I've talked about from these studies of these consultants nationally, would be of benefit in terms of any city talking about how can we reach where we want to go and what's our role in getting there. It's not one-sided. And again, the city manager is required to be responsive to the commission. And if he or she is not responsive, without allowing intrusion into their role.
Responsive to the commission, not necessarily responsive to individual commissions.
That's correct. The state law is very clear. A single commissioner has no authority outside the meeting of a commissioner. They have no authority. It's a board. It's a commission.
Shouldn't that commission leadership come through the mayor?
Not in a city manager form. It is a five-party equal opportunity or obligation. A strong mayor, it's one person leading, but the commission, the executive authority, is vested in the commission entirely, except what is given out to the city manager.
It seems to me once they make that decision, that interpretation of that decision should come through the mayor.
No, that is not in keeping with the statutory form. The mayor presides, and he signs official acts and bond notes and that type of thing, but he does not have power to appoint, such as Brian talked about, the mayor talked about. He does not have power to develop the budget. That all comes from the commissioners through the city manager.
Okay. Carol, Christie, and then Dawn. And then Kate. Yeah.
Could you leave us a copy of that list?
Which list?
The
The statutory list? I could,
The 6 things that you talked about with the
Yes.
commission.
oh, yes, I'll be happy to. Yes, I will.
The statutory.
Well, there's two different things. One is the roles, the 6 roles. The other is the statutory.
To see what
Well, you can look it up yourself if you go to LRC, and I can tell you the code for that.
Hey, Ryan, it's 83A. 83A.
Yeah, it's 83A. I was looking for the specific ones, but it's all listed under KRS 83A.
Christine.
So I first want to say, I don't mean this disrespectfully, because I greatly appreciate you all being here tonight. My question, though, is we have the mayor from Versailles. Clearly, your form of government is functioning well. Are you Danville?
Yes.
Danville, and your way of government is functioning well. We have our mayor here. We have our city commissioners in here. Why are we not talking to them this evening so that we can actually hear about our form of government here and what we might do to strengthen it a little bit more? Or maybe they think it's strong, but I just want to hear from our mayor.
Well,
Is that not allowed?
it's not allowed under state law in terms of having, without meeting notice. You know, they can attend informative sessions, but they cannot interact or vote or discuss, really, in forums such as this. This is a community learning forum or hearing. It's not an official act of the city commission.
Well, yes, I understand that, but we're also learning about forms of government that aren't here, if that makes sense. Because neither one of you have the form of government that we have. Is that correct?
Yes, no, he
Danville
does.
has.
You do.
Danville,
So
yeah,
you're
sure,
city manager,
Right.
sure.
And so you have your
Prior city
commissioners and
manager.
mayor.
Prior city manager, yes.
Prior.
I think one of the reasons that we're having this forum is so that folks can get a better understanding of the different types of government that cities can have, so that they in turn can ask our elected officials, you know, pointed questions about how it works, or why it doesn't work, and how. And I appreciate the fact that our commissioners and candidates for commission are all here now, because I hope it helps give them a better understanding of what happens in other places.
I have a question for Brian.
Sure. Wait. Hold on. I got
Yeah.
Don and Kay. Then you, Bill.
My question is that the mayor pointed out that the buck stops with him. In the city manager form of government, that there isn't that clear, the buck stops at an individual person. Wouldn't a compromise of sorts be to have a strong mayor form of government, so the buck stops with the mayor, but have a city administrator that has the professional aspect of a city manager? So you have the professionalism of a city manager to handle so much of that day to day, but have the buck stopping with the mayor and the accountability that a strong mayor gives to the city. That, to me, the city manager form of government doesn't have that same force of accountability.
40 cities or more in Kentucky have city administrators that report under their local ordinance to the mayor and have the authority and powers statutorily of the mayor in his absence, but it doesn't involve more brains in the game that the city commission form has. You are still, you know, directing from the top, if you will, the legislative and operational activities of the city. You do have the buck stops there, but you may prefer that form, or you may not.
Oh, I think that is a hybrid that could work. Versailles, Frankfort's obviously larger than Versailles, but Versailles is not as small as people think. We spend about $22 million a year in our budget, and we have 110 full-time employees. So there's, you know, my job is not an easy job. I don't have an administrator, but if a mayor were to come in who couldn't devote the time, who may not have the abilities, that option I think is a nice hybrid to allow the accountability. I agree completely, the accountability of a mayor, because when you look at the job of mayor, if you traveled anywhere in this country and someone introduced you to the mayor, you're going to think they're the boss of something. And if you I know that Frankfort is a city manager form of government. If I had a question or an issue, I would call Lane instead of the city manager, because in my mind, the word mayor triggers accountability. It triggers the face of the city more than just a titular head of the city that has no power. But I think your way, it's not, certainly I have no say in anything over here, but if I did, that would.
Okay,
I
go
have
ahead.
a question about agendas for the commission. Does statute say who should write the agendas, and who writes the agenda for the commission meetings in the different forms?
Well, statutorily, in the city manager form of government, the mayor presides over the public meetings. Now, that's a good question you ask, and I would say actual practices sort of vary in city manager cities. In some, and I would say in my case, when I was serving in the city of Danville, I would involve input from the city manager, the department heads, other sources, community members, and it was up to the city manager to give final approval to the agenda. And sometimes that provided, if you will, relief to the mayor. We had some hot topics at the time that maybe he didn't want to address, but the mayor is the ceremonial head. He is not the person that develops the agenda, with respect. That's how the statute reads. That's how, at least in Danville, we operated. But if a city manager is a little bit savvy, he wants to involve conversations with the mayor ahead of time and other commissioners too. And some cities, and I would say even cities that have converted from a strong manager, and I'm talking about nationally now, to a mayor, they adopt sort of a agreed upon procedures of how they develop agendas. How can commissioners get their own agenda items up for public, discussion? Most cities, and Frankfort and Bowling Green and other large cities, have work sessions where the topics are brought in to discuss. Community members can involve their briefing sessions. And so you've got this, 2-week window ahead of your official meetings that you typically go through a lot of stuff so that the actual meetings of the city operate pretty smoothly.
And I assume in strong mayor, the mayor sets the agenda.
Yes, but if you have a regular meeting, we have a point on our agenda that is, if you have a regular meeting, you are not bound by that agenda for public meeting. Now, if you have a special meeting, you're bound by only that agenda. So when we have regularly scheduled meetings, which are we only change them in extreme circumstances, there's a place on there for the council can bring up anything that could realistically be in order. So they can't get shut out. The only way I could shut them out is to be queued and reschedule our meetings all the time, so they're all special, which is an idea I'm taking home. Thank you.
Rich?
I want to change directions in the conversation slightly. My experience is in business, and if you see someone who's running a business unit, it requires, if they're doing a really good job of it, and think of this in terms of a city manager, if they're doing a really good job of it, they are good at strategic thinking, which is kind of long-term, looking at the big picture, call it strategic planning, if you will. But they also have to be good at tactics, which is implementing the day-to-day, making sure that in the city's case, the city staff, all its operations are running smoothly. And it's hard in business to find someone who has both kind of the long-term perspective and the short-term expertise. And trying to find a city manager who could do both of those well and keep people who are concerned about one issue or the other, keeping both sides satisfied. Now, what we've done recently here in Frankfort is we've got a new city manager, but we've also got an assistant city manager, which is something new for us. And I think that has the potential to divide that long-term and short-term perspective. I almost would like to see the title of the assistant city manager changed think of it as, I think we've maybe been putting too much on one individual's plate, the city manager's plate, to require them to do both that long-term and the short-term, the day-to-day and the vision roles that a city manager has. And I'm hoping that with this new structure with a city manager and assistant city manager, that their responsibilities will divide along those lines rather than the assistant city manager just being the gopher for the city manager. Have you seen any instances where the city manager's job has been kind of divided and delegated?
Well, yes, you can look at the larger cities, such as Frankfort is a larger city, but Owensboro, I think, and Bowling Green, certainly, you've got assistant city managers that focus on a variety of things separate than that of the city manager, who has the coordinating role of bringing all of the city's activities in line with what the commission wants to happen, basically. So yes, in the larger communities where you've got greater complexity, you need more hands in the game, and that's certainly a good way to go. And I would encourage everyone to think of, you know, the cost of a city manager or an assistant city manager. It's an investment in your future. It really is not a cost. And most of the folks that I know that serve in those roles, they save the city well beyond what they're paid in their operations every year.
Lyda?
I've learned a lot about what a commissioner does and what a city manager does, but I'm a little confused about the role of the mayor in the middle of this. What is their role in running the city? They don't have the power of a mayor-run government, so how do they function in between the two entities?
Well, statutorily, you understand that they are limited to presiding and to signing documents. They are the face of the community. They can be a focus for motivating the commission to reach higher and do more. They are if the buck doesn't stop there, it very nearly does. Otherwise, there's a lot of calls that go to mayors. I know that, and the mayor can have an impact on the activities of the city. They typically, because their terms are twice as long as city commissioners, they got 4 years. They can wait out or overcome or influence commissioners in terms of their activities. They have unwritten power within their community by virtue of the fact that they are mayor. But no, they do not have a vote beyond that of the other commissioners. They're one of equals, and that was designed under the form of government that, again, most cities, over 2,500 in this country and abroad, have adopted and have been long held in England and Ireland and Northern Ireland and so forth. So it's a different way of looking at it, where you don't look for the one person to solve the problems, but you involve the ideas and enthusiasm and the visions of a multitude of people and come up with your goals or your activities or what you want to do and employ someone to get it done.
Two words I like that I heard from you as mayor were vision and risk-taking. So in our form, city manager government, does the mayor have an opportunity for vision and risk-taking?
I think it would be challenging in that form of government. I think my form of government, there are very few shackles on me beyond statutory code of ethics. We have the legislature's requirement for code of ethics, not that they've ever messed anything up, is horribly inadequate. Cities have to go above and beyond to enact good. But those kind of controls, I don't think any are here, are they? I think it would be a challenge. I just envisioning if I functioned in that role, I think it would be a challenge. And, risk-taking is not always a good thing. Obviously, it can go wrong, but, to have that ability is awful. It's awful free. Mayors cost a lot less than city managers, too. I can assure you that I make less than every city manager in this state does.
Well, I would have a different, somewhat different response or view on that. I've seen mayors, and I worked with many of them throughout my tenure with the League of Cities, both in city manager cities as well as mayors, and they can have a great influence on outcomes. They do take risk. Anyone who runs for public office takes a risk in terms of putting themselves out there, and the way they vocalize their ideas, their projects, their goals in the community, it's all risk-taking. You know, in terms of what we did in Danville during my tenure there, we renovated a $26 million water treatment plant. That was a risk. You know, we did it at a time because of advanced planning. We got 1% money in terms of doing that debt and financing that improvement that improves the entire district for multiple counties around there in terms of water distribution. So it's all on how you involve the talents and the skills of the people on the commission, including the mayor, and the mayor can lead in that and usually does. You know, I could not envision a time when one of the commissioners would get ahead of a mayor who's got twice the tenure and is elected by the entire community, you know, as in that perceived head of government, even though his or her powers are a little bit limited.
What does a strong mayor do if the people don't go along with it?
If the people don't go along with the vision,
Great ideas but you're not getting support.
well, I think you've got two options. You try harder to get that support, obviously, or you retreat and go a different direction. But I think a strong mayor has the ability. If it's a good idea, it would take a bad mayor to not be able to sway that support publicly. Just the title alone carries a lot of people respect the title, and citizens respect it. And as much as they hate or claim to hate politicians, we all like them. I like them a little bit, and my wife does. So, I think if you can't change it, I think you've got to retreat. But you have a big microphone with which to try to get out there and do it. So the challenge is to elect good mayors who are capable, who are good communicators, who can get out there and sell that, not only have a good vision, but be able to sell it, force the council to back you on it.
Well, we're talking about working together, aren't we? Respect and work, they should feel like a team, that they're doing the best for our community. And that may be not pie in the sky kind of thing, but that's what, can't we work together, people? You know.
You can apply that to the whole country.
Well, I didn't.
Bill, did you have a question?
Brian, I used to run up and down the streets of sales and try to work on talking to people and getting things done and that kind of stuff. Never had a whole lot of success. I know here, I've heard people say, I'm not just saying some personal opinion, that we have master plans, we have consultant studies, we have all these different plans and things, and everyone tells me that it just goes in the door somewhere. Now, Lane, I'm not making any criticisms of city council people, I'm just saying what I hear on the street. And I know that for sales, at one time, we had all the same things, the city commissions and the plan for Versailles Road and the plan for downtown and the plan to have, business community and residences together and all that. We did the charrettes, all those things. And, but now, for some reason, Versailles seems to have things going on. Is it y'all have decided to come together? Do you have a new council? Do you have private investment? Where is the difference in Versailles?
The big difference, I would think, of course, I would like to think I play a small part in that, Bill, and I wish you'd have said as much, but I think we made our mayor full-time. So I joked about pay. I get paid a lot more than Lane does to be mayor, I can tell you that. So I get paid fairly well, and it's the only job I do. I have no other source of income beyond that. I think that made a world of difference because we had, and you live there, we had a previous mayor who had outside interests. And I don't begrudge somebody has to feed their family, But my sole source of income is the city of Versailles. It's the only thing I devote my time to, and that makes it's almost like a city manager who's on the ballot, in essence, and it's enabled us to move things along.
So,
I think having compensating your mayor, I think, is important, because I think taxpayers should value it. I mean, that's the challenge. Value the job, get somebody who deserves it, and I think you'll be fine.
Barbara?
Did we ever determine where the buck stops with the city manager form of government? We were talking earlier about that.
Well, ultimately, I would say the answer is, at least at the first phase of it, the city manager is held accountable, he or she, because he is delegated the authority and the responsibility by the city commission for performance. And that's why the system can work very well, in that if the city manager has the appropriate skill set and is given the opportunity and is not interfered with, that's where the accountability should be. And the system is set up that if it's not working, you change city managers. That is the accountability, and it's the accountability of the elected officials to do that. But at the same time, the city manager holds an important position. Other than just being accountable, he is the sole employee of the city commission. All activities should go to him for implementation, him or her, and not around him or her, because there's nothing more demoralizing to an individual than to have that happen. And all city employees are at-will employees in this state, and I think the Commonwealth of Kentucky too. And so sometimes you get elected officials who come in and want to clean house, the old politics, and it happens when you have changes of strong mayors, and there's examples not too far from here that we could go into. And that gives little assurance to city employees that their jobs are safe. And so the city manager is an important person of stability in terms of the workforce and its productivity, and he's accountable. He or she is accountable for that.
I have a question. Across the state, are most city commissioners elected at large or by district?
Most at large, I would say. Now, the only district I know, Hopkinsville, has 12 city members of their council. They're by ward. And cities can adopt by ordinance with particular timing of the elections, to change from an at-large to a at-ward system. My view is that, and there's maybe arguments on both sides, but if you get too many wards in a city, you get very narrow sort of viewpoints in terms of what the city should do for whom, where, and you don't get the overall picture that I think is more beneficial for at-large representation.
I would agree with that completely. We looked at dividing Versailles up into wards, and the way the statute reads, the representative comes from the ward and it's voted on citywide. So it's kind of the worst of both worlds, really, I believe.
You think at large is better?
Yes.
Does anybody else have a last question? Rick?
Yeah, this is probably just a comment more so than a question. But, we have had some tenured city managers. Paul Royster was here for about 18 years. Ken Thompson was 13 or 14 years. The ones that followed him, 3 to 5 years. I think maybe what we ought to look at in this 12 and 21 years is what has happened in the last 8 or 9 years that have caused us to have so many city managers.
I'd like to respond to that in a general way, if I may. And maybe this is, we're running out of time perhaps, but in many positions in city governments, it's getting very difficult to fill those positions, harder to fill the positions with skilled personnel. The older folks, and I knew both of those individuals you're talking about personally, Mr. Royster as well as the other, Ken Thompson. But the older folks are retiring. And, believe it or not all young folks think city government is a great place to begin their careers. So you have you have that challenge. And maybe that in part has caused some of the turnover where you have less experienced and less commitment over their careers to that position. But my own view of both of those individuals you mentioned were that they were very professional in their administration of the city. And they had worked in other places, I know, in city and county before here.
Don?
The last several city managers have not been professional city managers. One was a city engineer who then took the position of city manager. The current city manager was the fire chief and is now the city manager. Trying to think of there. And another had been in positions of a consultant, but not actually worked previously as a city manager. How do you feel about people working as a city manager but are not actually professional city managers? Do you think that sort of comes into the problem of having 12 and 21 years?
The statutory requirements for educational and background are general in terms of the requirements of being knowledgeable about a city and being well-versed in its operation. So it's up to the commission to hire their city managers. Historically, when we began this enterprise in the early 1900s, many of the city managers at that time were civil engineers. They built things for the WPA era, the 30s and so forth. And in Danville now, currently, for example, the person I worked with is a city engineer, and he is the city manager now. It can work. The variety of skills that people bring to the position are really viewed and judged appropriately by the city commission. And so it's not for me to say who's qualified and who's not qualified.
Can I add one thing? To put a plug in an organization that Ron and I both hold dear, the Kentucky League of Cities provides a lot of adequate training for mayors. So you come in and you learn the basics, and you can learn, and that's how I interact with your mayor. We have city managers have a good camaraderie across the state. Mayors do as well. So you're not out there alone in this. I'm not. Your mayor's not. We're able to learn from one another and share ideas.
Thank you. I guess we're going to wrap it up. It's been an hour and a half. But thank you all so much for agreeing to come and help shine some light on how this works. I have a little gift from Together Frankfort for you all. Thanks again. There's somebody please eat cookies. Please eat cookies.